Hi guys and welcome to Fandom Newbie. My name is Shruti and today is another really special video. Now, a month and a half ago or a few weeks ago actually, I did a video where I read books recommended by Shah Rukh Khan, and after that I decided that I would do more videos where I read books recommended by celebrities. So the celebrity that I've chosen for this video is Sushant Singh Rajput, and I'm going to be reading books recommended by him. Now, we all know that Sushant Singh Rajput absolutely loved books. In fact, he had an entire Twitter handle where he would recommend books that he was reading, and he would also share his followers' book recommendations, and it was just a place where he would talk about books. He would also speak about books in multiple interviews, and it was just very evident that he cared a lot about reading and he cared a lot about books. Now, the way that I've chosen his book recommendations is based off of that Twitter handle, so the books that he recommended on that Twitter handle, and I also chose books based off of this video that he did on YouTube where you can see his bookshelf. So the books which were in that bookshelf, I chose some of those books as well. So yep, let's just jump straight into this video. Okay, so the first book that I chose is Lord of the Flies by William Golding, and I had actually already read this book. Now, one thing that I noticed while I was doing this video and choosing the books for this video is that Sushant Singh Rajput's taste in books is very similar to my husband's taste in books. They both have very similar kinds of books that they read, and in fact my husband had forced me to read this book, so that's why I had already read it before planning this video. But essentially what this book is about is that a plane carrying a bunch of English schoolboys crashes on a deserted island and they are left to fend for themselves. The boys kind of form different factions of one group becomes the hunters, one group becomes the people who build shelters, and initially everything seems to be going well, everyone is doing their duties and their jobs, but after a few days chaos kind of breaks loose and things start getting really strange and very, very scary. So what this book actually deals with, the theme that it deals with, is how humanity would react when the boundaries of law, order, and just societal structures, when they collapse, how human beings would react and how human beings would whether they would devolve into chaos and just become barbarians, or whether they would preserve their humanity. So that's the question that the author poses in this book, and it is really strange, it is really twisted and very, very scary and disturbing to read at times, but also extremely hard-hitting. I feel it's an essential book that everyone should read. It's also a very short read. It's how many pages? 206 pages. You can easily read this in 1 or 2 days because it is extremely gripping and it is not that difficult to read, even though it is a classic. So yeah, highly recommend this book. Definitely check it out. Hi guys. Okay, so I have just finished the second book recommended by Sushant Singh Rajput on my list, and that is The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera. There is just so much to unpack about this book. I don't even know where to begin. So essentially what this book is about is the lives of 4 characters and their romantic entanglements and relationships with one another. Now, some of these relationships are born out of marriage, and most of them are actually infidelities. And to be honest, plot-wise, that's about it. It's about their love stories and their romantic relationships. The interesting thing about this book is that the political backdrop against which these romantic relationships are set is the late 1960s in Prague, which was the time of the Russian occupation of Prague and Czechoslovakia and the rise of the communist regime and the Prague Spring. And while politics doesn't take up a huge chunk of this book, you can see how this political turmoil affects their mindset and also how it creeps into their day-to-day lives and their romantic relationships. So that part was also very interesting in the book. But at the core of this book, the author has tried to give us some philosophical learnings and philosophical teachings through the lives of these 4 characters. And what was really interesting about this is how the author at some points, he broke the fourth wall in the sense, because the author is extremely self-aware that he is an author who has created these 4 characters to tell us about his philosophical learnings. So there are many instances when the author just speaks to you directly about a character and tries to explain those philosophical learnings. So it was just such an interesting narrative structure and such an interesting way to convey his messages, where it's just extremely self-aware, and in some cases it felt very jarring, but the philosophies that Milan Kundera has tried to explain through this book were quite poignant and just very, very interesting. Read this book because firstly, it teaches you something new. It was a unique narrative style and just overall very, very interesting. Okay, so I have just finished reading Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, and oh my god, it's taken me 1 month to read this book. This was my fourth attempt, I think, at reading this book, and I have finally finished it, and I feel very accomplished. Like, I feel so accomplished at having finished this book. Now, firstly, the reason why it took me so long to read this book is not because it's a very difficult book. In fact, it's quite accessible and easy to read. But the reason why it took me so long is because I just suck at reading non-fiction. Like, non-fiction books really do take me much longer to read than fiction, and yeah, that's really it. It's just, it doesn't hold my attention long enough like fiction books do, so it just takes me longer to read. But having said that, this book, even though it did take me longer to read, it is quite a fascinating and interesting book, and I do highly, highly recommend it to everyone. Now, what this book is about, it's basically what it says here. It's a brief history of humankind, because he has mapped out the entire history of humans, right from, you know, like the evolution of Homo sapiens to like modern times. So it has everything. It talks about the cognitive revolution of how, you know, like how the different species of humans kind of evolved. It talks about that. It talks about the agricultural revolution. It talks about the birth of religions. It talks about how currencies and money came into being. And it also talks about capitalism and issues that the modern world is facing today. And it really kind of talks about this entire history like the form of a story, which is linked in such a beautiful way by Yuval Noah Harari, and it's just really, really well written and quite intriguing. So you want to know what happens next as he keeps progressing through different eras of human evolution. Even if you don't like nonfiction, pick this book up because it was extremely enlightening. I have just finished reading Jailbird by Kurt Vonnegut, and I am a little bit disappointed. So I had watched Avdut from Read Travel Becomes video on Kurt Vonnegut being Sushant Singh Rajput's favorite author, and I was really excited to read his book after watching that video. And then I also watched this like TED Ed or TEDx video which spoke about Kurt Vonnegut's writing style and how it's very different from the way that other authors write. And Avdut also mentioned this in his video about how the way he structures his stories are not linear, and also they don't follow the progression that normal stories follow. They don't follow that kind of same structure. And also I'd heard a lot about like the absurdity of Kurt Vonnegut's writing style. So I was really excited to read his book to see how different and intriguing his writing style would be. And Jailbird was just nothing like that. It was a very, very straightforward, simple story, and I didn't see anything different in the way this story was written as compared to other books. And so then I googled some stuff and I found out that actually Jailbird is actually the most Kurt Vonnegut-like book that has ever been written by Kurt Vonnegut. So I feel like I just chose the wrong book to start with. Maybe I shouldn't have chosen this book and I should have chosen some of his other really famous books. But for some reason I found this in a blog that I checked, which said that Sushant Singh Rajput recommended this book. So I don't know, maybe I was just unlucky in the type in the book that I chose. But basically this book is about like this person who was thrown in prison because he was involved in the Watergate scandal of President Nixon in the United States. And that was the other thing that I didn't like about this book, or rather like I just didn't care, because it's very, very political and it's very heavily based on the Watergate scandal and all of the things happening in the US at that time. It had to do with a lot of like workers' unions and capitalism and Watergate. And I'm just not interested in US politics that much, especially the US politics of the past. So I think also because I again Googled and like saw other people's reviews, and they've said that this is Kurt Vonnegut's most political book that he wrote. So his other books kind of deal with more social commentary, which is there in this book also, but this is his most political book that he's written. So again, I just feel that I chose the wrong Kurt Vonnegut book. But yeah, overall, like I didn't find this book anything different, and I also didn't find this book interesting because of the subject matter. Alright, so I just finished reading The Stranger by Albert Camus. I think that's how you pronounce his name because he's French. But basically this book was originally written in French and then later translated into English. Now this book is a classic, but it is one of the easiest and most straightforwardly written classics that I have ever read. Like really, this book is super duper accessible, very easy to read. So I think it's one that is excellent for beginners who want to read a classic. Now, even though the book is written in a very straightforward manner and that it is very easy to read, the themes that the author explores through the story, those are quite deep in this book. Now, the story is also quite simple. It follows this man who seems to be very detached from emotions and kind of sociopathic in that sense, but basically the story is split into two halves. The first half focuses on the life of this man before he commits a particular crime, and the second half is basically the aftermath of that crime and what happens to that man. But through the story and also the different people who this man interacts with, the author has explored two themes. The first one is on the meaning of life. So the author kind of questions what is the meaning of life and what is its purpose, kind of like the unbearable lightness of being in that sense. And then the second theme that the author has explored is just what is morality and what does humanity mean. So basically, like, what makes a person immoral or inhuman? Is it like, you know, what is our kind of, how do we judge other human beings on whether they are immoral or inhuman, and what is that standard of morality that people set for themselves in society? And it was really interesting because, like I said, this character, the main character, is a little bit sociopathic and just kind of devoid of emotions. And it's really interesting to see how everyone and the reader, like I myself, was judging this man when basically it's based on this level of morality that we have set in society. So why should we judge this person for behaving the way he did in some circumstances? And why should we call him immoral? So it was a very, very interesting reading experience because, like, while it was a very simple and easy read, there were so many different like questions and themes and thoughts running through my head as I was reading it. That was just like, oh yeah, why do we do this? And why do we consider this weird behavior? Or like, you know, it was a very like gray area where like some things I knew that this person did was wrong, completely wrong, but like some things I found myself judging him. But then I'm just like, yeah, why am I judging him and why am I thinking all of these things? So it was just a very interesting reading experience, very profound, and I highly recommend this book as well. I think it was a very, very interesting reading experience. Doing this little reading experiment and reading Sushant Singh Rajput's favorite books really made me realize that he loved books which dug deeper into certain themes, as well as books which had certain philosophies in them. Even though they were fiction books, like a lot of these were fiction books, they really had interesting themes and interesting concepts of humanity, of the meaning of life, and these deeper themes in them, which was very interesting. Also, I feel like I would never have picked up these books without doing this experiment. Like these books are very different from what I'm usually used to. So yeah, it was a really interesting reading experiment. I thoroughly enjoyed reading a lot of these books, and I'm excited to do more of these types of videos in the future. So if you guys enjoyed this video, then give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below letting me know which other celebrities' book recommendations I should try out. And of course, do subscribe to my channel for more book related videos. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.